Commander Zethkar stepped carefully across the frozen surface of the moon Keralis. Each step sent small cracks through the ancient ice beneath his massive claws. The cold meant nothing to his thick, scaled hide, but the silence worried him. This place should not be silent. The Draknari leader had ruled the ice colonies for over 3 centuries. His people were warriors, hunters who thrived in the endless winter of their chosen worlds. They built their homes deep in glacial caves and raised their young in the safety of the frozen depths. But today, something was wrong. The distress signal had come from the nursery caves 12 hours ago. Then, nothing. Complete silence. No response to calls, no movement on the thermal scanners. The automated systems showed the caves were intact, the temperature stable. But where were the guardians? Where were the younglings? Zethkar's second-in-command, Captain Veltar, moved beside him with equal caution. "Commander, the entrance shows signs of conflict, scorch marks from energy weapons, some of our own weapons, but others." He paused, examining the blackened ice. "Others I don't recognize." The entrance to the nursery cave system loomed before them like a great mouth in the glacier. The Draknari had carved these tunnels over generations, creating a maze of chambers where their young could grow safely. Multiple entrances, hidden passages, rooms that could be sealed in emergencies. It was supposed to be the safest place in their territory. "How many younglings were inside?" Zethkar asked, though he knew the answer. 43, Commander. Ages ranging from 6 months to 3 years. Plus 4 adult guardians. 43 children. The future of the colony. Zethkar felt his spinal ridges rise with anger. Someone had attacked the most sacred place of his people. When he found who was responsible, they would learn why the galaxy feared Draknari justice. They moved deeper into the cave system, following the main tunnel. Emergency lighting cast blue shadows on the ice walls. Their claws clicked against the frozen floor with each step. The sound echoed strangely, as if the caves themselves were holding their breath. "Commander," Veltar said softly. "Movement ahead." Zethkar raised one massive hand, signaling for silence. They crept forward, weapons ready. Around a bend in the tunnel, they could see into one of the larger chambers. Light flickered there, not the steady glow of their emergency systems, but something that danced and moved. Fire. Someone had built a fire in the ice caves. They reached the chamber entrance and stopped. What they saw made no sense. The chamber was warm, much warmer than it should be. A small fire burned in the center, but it wasn't melting the walls. Somehow, the heat was contained, controlled. Around the fire, arranged in neat groups on thick blankets, were the missing younglings, all 43 of them, alive, sleeping peacefully. But that wasn't what made Zethkar freeze in shock. It was the figure sitting among them, a human. The creature was small, maybe half Zethkar's height, with pale skin and dark hair. It wore strange clothing, not the environmental suits humans usually needed in cold environments, just simple fabrics that looked handmade. In its lap sat the youngest of the Draknari children, a tiny female barely 6 months old. The human was feeding her from a bottle, making soft sounds. The human looked up as they entered. Its face showed no fear, only a calm alertness. It was female, Zethkar realized, though human gender differences were subtle to Draknari eyes. She had been watching the entrance, expecting them. "You're the one in charge," she said in accented but clear Draknari. Her voice was quiet, careful not to wake the sleeping children. "I've been waiting for you." Veltar raised his weapon, but Zethkar motioned for him to stop. Something about this scene was wrong. Not dangerous wrong, but unexpected wrong. "Who are you?" Zethkar demanded. "How did you get here? What happened to our guardians?" The human carefully set the bottle aside and lifted the youngling to her shoulder, patting its back gently. The baby made small, contented sounds. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm a xenobiologist from the research station on Corrales Prime. As for your guardians, she nodded toward another chamber. They're alive, but injured. I've done what I can for them. You attacked them? No. Sarah's voice was firm. The Vex Corporation raiders attacked them. They were taking the children when I arrived. Zethkar felt his blood chill. The Vex Corporation, slavers and worse who took sentient beings to sell on the black market. Draknari younglings would bring high prices from collectors who wanted exotic pets. The thought made his claws extend involuntarily. The raiders? He asked. Gone, Sarah said simply. I convinced them to leave. Veltar made a sound that might have been laughter. You convinced them? A single human convinced Vex raiders to abandon valuable cargo? Sarah looked at him with those strange human eyes, brown and warm in the firelight. I can be very persuasive. She stood carefully, still holding the baby, and moved to check on another youngling who had stirred in its sleep. As she walked, Zethkar noticed several things. First, her movements were confident, practiced. She knew how to handle Draknari children. Second, the younglings trusted her completely. They didn't wake as she passed, but several unconsciously moved toward her warmth. Third, and most unsettling, there were weapons scattered around the chamber. Human weapons he didn't recognize, but also Vex energy rifles and Draknari ceremonial blades. Far too many weapons for one person to have used. How many raiders were there? He asked. 12, Sarah replied without hesitation, plus a Vex battle-class android. Veltar's ridges flattened against his skull. 13 hostiles, and you're telling us you handled them alone? I had help, Sarah said. She gestured to the sleeping children. Your younglings are very brave. Zethkar studied the human woman more carefully. She was clean, uninjured, calm. Her clothes showed no signs of battle. But the weapons around the room told a different story. Scorch marks on the walls, blast patterns, even what looked like claw marks on the ice. Show me the guardians, he ordered. Sarah nodded and led them to an adjoining chamber. The 4 adult Draknari lay on improvised beds, bandaged with what looked like torn human clothing and Vex medical supplies. All were unconscious but breathing steadily. Stun weapons, mostly, Sarah explained. The raiders wanted to avoid damaging the merchandise, but Guard Captain Thekatal fought them directly. He has a broken arm and several burns. I set the bone and treated the wounds, but he needs proper medical attention. Zethkar knelt beside his old friend. Thektal had served as head of youngling protection for 50 years. He was a warrior of incredible skill and fierce loyalty. If he had been taken down, the battle must have been brutal. The medical supplies, Veltar observed. They're Vex military grade? Yes, Sarah agreed. I took them from the raiders' ship before it left. You boarded their ship? Briefly. Zethkar was beginning to understand that this human woman spoke in careful understatements. Briefly probably meant something very different from what it sounded like. He returned to the main chamber where the younglings slept. Now that he looked more closely, he could see signs of the battle, blast marks carefully positioned away from where children might have been. Defensive positions that would have protected the younglings while allowing return fire. Someone had fought a tactical battle here, using the chamber's layout to maximum advantage. Tell me exactly what happened, he said. Sarah settled back down with the baby, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder. I was conducting surveys in the outer regions when I detected the Vex ship entering your airspace. I tried to contact your security forces, but communications were being jammed. By the time I reached the nursery caves, the raiders were already inside. And you decided to interfere? They were taking children. Sarah's voice was quiet, but Zethkar heard steel beneath it. I don't allow that. Even children that weren't your species? Sarah looked up at him, and for a moment her human features showed something that reminded him of a Draknari warrior's battle rage. Especially then. Veltar was examining the weapons scattered around the room. "Commander, these human weapons, I've never seen designs like them." "They're not standard issue," Sarah admitted. "I design my own equipment for field research. Sometimes you encounter unexpected problems, such as heavily armed raider teams, such as any threat to innocent life." The baby in Sarah's arms stirred and made small crying sounds. Without hesitation, she began to rock gently, making soothing sounds in what Zethkar recognized as a traditional Draknari lullaby. The child settled immediately. "You know our songs," he observed. "I've been studying your culture for 3 years. Your music is beautiful." She paused. "Your children are beautiful too. When I saw those raiders carrying them away in stasis pods..." "You couldn't stand by," Zethkar finished. "Would you have?" The question hung in the cold air. Of course he wouldn't have. No honorable being would. But Sarah was one small human against a full raider team. She should have called for help, waited for backup, followed proper protocols. Instead, she had chosen to fight impossible odds to protect children that weren't even her species. "The battle," Veltar said. "Walk us through it." Sarah shifted the sleeping baby to a more comfortable position. "I entered through the South Passage while they were still organizing their operation. The Guardians were already down, the children were terrified. The raiders had them in the main chamber, loading them into portable stasis units. 13 hostiles, Zethkar said. You were outnumbered 13-1. 44-1, actually, Sarah corrected. I had the children helping. The younglings fought? They followed instructions very well. Your people raise brave children, Commander. When I told them to hide, they hid. When I told them to move, they moved. When I needed them to stay absolutely silent, not one of them made a sound. Zethkar felt a surge of pride in his people's young, but also a growing respect for this human who had earned their trust so quickly. The Vex android, Veltar said. Those units are designed for combat, military-grade armor, enhanced strength, integrated weapon systems. Yes, Sarah agreed. It was well built. Was? Sarah's expression didn't change. It had some design flaws I was able to exploit. Around the chamber, Zethkar was beginning to notice more details. Pieces of what might once have been an android, scattered Vex armor plating, energy weapon components that looked like they'd been very carefully taken apart. You destroyed a Vex battle android, he said slowly. I had motivation. And the other 12 raiders? They decided to reconsider their career choices. Veltar made that sound again, but this time it was definitely not laughter. It was the noise a Draknari made when trying to process something that didn't fit their understanding of the universe. Sarah stood and moved to check on another child who was beginning to wake. The youngling, maybe 2 years old, opened his eyes and saw her. Instead of fear, his face lit up with pure joy. He reached out with small claws, and Sarah let him grab her finger. Hello, Kezeth, she said softly. It's almost time for morning meal. Are you hungry? The child made happy chittering sounds and tried to climb into her arms. Sarah lifted him easily, and Zethkar noticed she was careful to support his head properly, avoid his small spinal ridges, hold him in the way that made Draknari younglings feel secure. You've done this before, he said. I've been helping at the Outer Research Station nursery when I can. Your people were very patient with me while I learned. She smiled. Children are children, regardless of species. They need food, warmth, safety, and love. The rest is just details. More younglings were beginning to wake, and the chamber was filling with small sounds of stirring children. Sarah moved among them with practiced ease, checking each one, speaking softly. making sure they were comfortable. Several reached for her as she passed, and she managed to give each one some attention while still maintaining order. "The fire," Zethkar said. "How did you build it without melting the walls?" "Controlled combustion field. I use it for field cooking during research trips. The heat envelope is very precisely contained." She paused beside a youngling who seemed groggy. "Are you feeling all right, Nelsara?" The young female nodded but leaned against Sarah's leg. Sarah placed a gentle hand on her forehead, checking for fever. "She's one of the ones who was already in stasis when I arrived," Sarah explained. "The shock of forced hibernation can be disorienting for young nervous systems. She should be fine, but she'll need careful monitoring for the next day or two." Zethkar realized that this human knew more about Draknari physiology than most of his own people. "Where did you learn our medical knowledge?" "Dr. Velthara at the research station has been teaching me. She said understanding physical development was crucial for proper cultural study." Sarah helped Nelsara to a comfortable spot near the fire. "When you're working with children, you need to know what's normal and what isn't." The name made Zethkar pause. Dr. Velthara was his sister, the colony's chief medical officer. She was also one of the most protective people he knew when it came to their species' secrets. If she had been teaching this human their medical knowledge, she must have believed Sarah could be trusted completely. "My sister never mentioned you," he said carefully. Sarah smiled. "She made me promise not to mention her lessons to anyone in authority. She said some people might not approve of sharing medical knowledge with an outsider." Her smile faded slightly. "I hope I haven't gotten her in trouble." "No," Zethkar said. "No, you haven't." But he was beginning to understand that there was much more to this situation than a simple rescue. This human had been living among his people, learning their ways, earning their trust. She wasn't just a xenobiologist studying them from the outside. She had become part of their community. More younglings were waking now, and the chamber was beginning to fill with the normal sounds of children starting their day. Sarah moved among them like an experienced caregiver, distributing food from supplies she had somehow gathered, checking that each child was healthy, mediating small disputes with gentle authority. "Sarah," called one of the older younglings, a male of almost 3 years. "Will you tell us the story about the brave explorer?" "After you finish eating, Jektar," she replied. "Stories always taste better on a full stomach." Several other children immediately echoed the request, and Sarah laughed. All right. But everyone eats first, and no fighting over the sweet biscuits." Zethkar watched this interaction with growing amazement. His people's children could be difficult even for experienced Draknari adults. They were naturally aggressive, territorial, quick to test authority. But they were following this human's instructions without question, treating her with the same respect they would show their own parents. "How long have you been working with them?" he asked. "About 6 months regularly, but I've been visiting the outer stations for 3 years. Your people have been very kind to me." "Kind?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, helping a youngling with his food. "When I first arrived, I was just another human researcher, polite but distant. But after a while, they started including me in things. Festivals, ceremonies, family gatherings. They taught me your language, your customs, your songs." She paused to wipe sauce from Nelsara's face. "They treated me like family. So when I saw raiders taking their children—" "You fought like family," Zethkar finished. "I fought like someone who had something worth protecting." The simple words carried a weight that made Zethkar's chest tighten with emotion. This human had found something among his people that she valued more than her own safety. She had risked everything to protect their young, not because it was her duty or because she was ordered to, but because she had chosen to make their fight her own. "The weapons," Veltar said quietly. Where did you learn to use them like that? Sarah's expression became more guarded. I have some experience with dangerous situations. What kind of experience? The kind that taught me never to hesitate when children are in danger. It was clear she wasn't going to elaborate, but Zethkar was beginning to form his own theories. This wasn't just a xenobiologist who happened to know self-defense. This was someone with serious combat training, someone who had fought before, someone who knew how to turn a defensive position into a killing ground. But she was also someone who had spent 6 months gently caring for Draknari children. Someone who knew their lullabies and their favorite foods and how to check for fever. Someone who had earned the trust of both younglings and adults in a community known for being suspicious of outsiders. The baby in Sarah's arms began to fuss, and she stood to walk with her, rocking gently. She's due for another feeding soon, Sarah said, and the others will need to return to normal schedules. They've been through a trauma, but children are resilient. With proper care, they should recover completely. And the guardians? They need medical attention, but they'll live. Dektal should be awake within a few hours. The others might take longer, but there's no permanent damage. Zethkar looked around the chamber one more time. 43 children, all safe. 4 guardians injured but alive. 13 raiders, defeated by one small human woman who had somehow turned a desperate situation into a victory. Sarah, he said, I need to understand something. You could have called for help. You could have waited for backup. Why did you choose to fight alone? Sarah looked down at the baby in her arms, then around at all the other children. Some were playing now, their trauma already beginning to fade in the way that children's trauma could when they felt safe again. Others were still staying close to her, needing reassurance. Because, she said simply, by the time help arrived, it would have been too late. These children would have been gone forever, sold to people who would see them as objects instead of the beautiful, wonderful beings they are. She shifted the baby to her other arm. I've seen what happens to children who are taken by slavers, Commander. I've seen the ones who are rescued months or years later, if they're lucky enough to be rescued at all. I've seen what it does to them. Her voice remained calm, but Zethkar could hear the pain beneath it. I couldn't let that happen to them. I wouldn't let that happen to them. Even though you might have died? Better that I die fighting for them than live knowing I let them be taken. The words hung in the air like a challenge to the universe itself. This was the human perspective that so many species found incomprehensible. The willingness to sacrifice everything for principles, for others, for abstract concepts like justice and protection of innocence. But watching Sarah with the Draknari children, seeing how they trusted her, how she cared for them, Zethkar was beginning to understand that it wasn't abstract at all. For her, these weren't alien children to be studied or protected out of duty. They were simply children, and they were hers to protect because she had chosen to love them. The realization hit him like a physical blow. This human woman loved his people's children as if they were her own species, her own family, her own young. She had risked her life not just out of principle, but out of love. Commander, Veltar said softly, we should contact the medical teams. Yes, Zethkar agreed, but he didn't move. He was still trying to process what he had discovered here. Sarah, the research station, do they know where you are? I sent a message that I was investigating unusual readings in this sector. They'll expect me to be out of contact for several days. And your own people? Won't they be concerned? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. There aren't many people who would be concerned about me, Commander. I chose this assignment partly because it was far from everything I knew. I wanted to start over, find something new. And have you found it? She looked around at the children, her expression soft with affection. Yes, I think I have. The baby had fallen asleep again, and Sarah moved to lay her down on the soft blankets near the fire. As she bent down, Zethkar noticed something he had missed before. Around her neck, on a simple chain, was a small pendant, Draknari made in the style used for family jewelry. "The pendant," he said. "Where did you get it?" Sarah's hand went automatically to the chain. "Dr. Velthara made it for me. She said it was traditional to give family jewelry to someone who had become part of the family." Family jewelry, given to an outsider. Zethkar felt the last pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. His sister didn't just trust this human with medical knowledge. She had formally adopted her into their family structure. No wonder the children trusted Sarah so completely. No wonder she had fought so fiercely to protect them. In the eyes of his people, she wasn't a human researcher studying them from outside. She was family, and family protected family, no matter the cost. Zethkar made a decision that surprised him with its certainty. "Sarah Chen," he said formally, "by the ancient laws of our people, and in recognition of your courage in protecting our young, I offer you the protection and friendship of the Draknari colony of Kiralis. You will be welcome in our homes, safe in our territory, and honored as one who has proven herself a true guardian of our people." Sarah looked up at him in surprise. "Commander, thank you. That's incredibly generous." "It's not generosity," Zethkar said. "It's recognition of what you've already proven yourself to be." He looked around the chamber one more time, at the sleeping children and the weapons scattered from battle and the small human woman who had somehow changed everything just by refusing to let innocent beings be harmed. "Welcome to the family, Guardian Sarah," he said. "I think we have much to learn from each other." 3 weeks after the raid, Zethkar found himself watching Sarah work in the colony's main workshop. She was designing something new, her hands moving quickly over holographic displays while she made careful measurements. Around her, several Draknari engineers watched with fascination as she explained concepts they had never seen before. "The energy field needs to be precisely calibrated," Sarah was saying, her Draknari now completely fluent. "Too weak, and it won't stop projectiles. Too strong, and it becomes a weapon itself. The key is adaptive resonance." Master Engineer Krelthok, whose family had built defensive systems for 5 generations, leaned closer to study her work. "But how do you account for different energy frequencies? Our shields work against most weapons, but they drain too much power." "Ah," Sarah smiled and adjusted the display. "That's where human engineering gets interesting. Instead of trying to stop every attack with brute force, we make the shield learn from each impact." The hologram showed a complex energy pattern that shifted and adapted as simulated weapons struck it. The field analyzes the incoming energy signature and adjusts its harmonic frequency to cancel it out, like noise-canceling technology, but for weapons. Krelthok's spinal ridges rose with excitement. "Incredible. Our power consumption would drop by 60% with this design." "Actually, about 78%, Sarah corrected gently. "I ran the calculations for your current grid specifications." Zethkar stepped into the workshop as the engineers began discussing implementation. Sarah looked up and smiled, wiping grease from her hands with a cloth. "Commander, how are the younglings today?" "Happy and healthy. Thanks to you. Nelsara asked if you would come tell stories again tonight." "Of course. I promised them the tale of the Crystal Caves." Sarah saved her work and turned away from the display. "Are you here to check on the shield project?" "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something else." Zethkar glanced around the workshop. "Privately." They walked outside into the cold air of Kiralis. The main settlement spread out below them, a mixture of traditional ice architecture and newer buildings that showed human influence. In the 3 weeks since the raid, Sarah had become deeply integrated into colony life. She wasn't just the human who had saved their children anymore. She was the woman who improved their technology, taught their young, helped solve problems no one else could figure out. "Sarah," Zethkar began, "I received a communication today from Earth Defense Command." Sarah stopped walking. For just a moment, her face went completely blank. Then she resumed her normal expression, but Zethkar had caught that flash of recognition. "Earth Defense Command?" she said carefully. "They're looking for someone, a missing operative who disappeared 3 years ago during a deep cover mission in this sector." Zethkar watched her face closely. "Someone with extensive combat training, advanced technical skills, and a specialty in xenobiology. That could describe a lot of people." Her name was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen, decorated veteran of the Centauri conflicts, expert in infiltration, sabotage, and what they called impossible rescues. Zethkar paused. She was reported killed in action when her ship was destroyed during a mission to stop illegal weapons trafficking. Sarah was quiet for a long time, looking out over the settlement. Finally, she said, "What did you tell them?" "That we had no record of anyone by that name in our sector." "Why?" Zethkar studied her profile against the pale sky. "Because the woman they described sounds like someone who would abandon a military life to protect children. Someone who would find peace studying alien cultures instead of fighting wars. Someone who might want to disappear from a life that had become too painful to continue." "And you think that someone deserves to stay disappeared?" "I think," Zethkar said carefully, "that Sarah Chen, the researcher, has done more good for my people in 3 years than Sarah Chen, the soldier, probably did in her entire military career." They walked in silence for several minutes, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. Finally, Sarah spoke again. "The Centauri conflicts were brutal. Humans and 3 alien species fighting over resources and territory. I spent 5 years watching good people die for causes that seemed important until you realized how many children were left orphaned by our noble war." She stopped beside a viewing platform that overlooked the colony's nursery complex. "My last mission was supposed to be simple. Stop weapons dealers from selling advanced human technology to raiders. But when I got there..." "Children," Zethkar said. 237 of them. Different species. All taken from their families to be sold as slaves. The weapons dealers were using them as test subjects for new stun technologies." Sarah's voice was steady, but her hands clenched into fists. "I was supposed to gather intelligence and report back. Wait for backup. Follow proper procedures. But you didn't." "I couldn't. I looked at those children in cages and realized that every minute I spent following procedures was another minute they suffered. So I improvised." "The impossible rescue," Sarah smiled grimly. "I got them all out. Every single child returned to their families, but it cost me my ship, my career, and officially my life. Earth Defense Command listed me as killed in action because it was easier than explaining how one operative had destroyed a weapons trafficking network that 3 task forces hadn't been able to touch. So you came here." "I came here to disappear, to study peaceful cultures, and maybe learn how to live without violence." She looked down at the nursery complex, where Draknari children played safely in enclosed courtyards. "I thought I had found that." "Until the Vex Raiders arrived. Until they threatened your children. Then I discovered that some things are worth fighting for, no matter how much you want to live peacefully." Zethkar understood now why Sarah had fought with such deadly efficiency against the raiders. She wasn't just a xenobiologist who knew self-defense. She was one of humanity's elite military operatives. Someone trained to handle impossible odds and win. But she was also someone who had walked away from that life to care for children and study cultures she found beautiful. "The shield technology you're developing," he said. "It's military grade, isn't it?" "Significantly better than military grade. I've had 3 years to think about defensive systems without having to worry about budget constraints or military bureaucracy." Sarah's expression grew thoughtful. The Draknari approach to engineering is fascinating. You build for permanence, for sustainability. Human military tech is designed for maximum effect in minimum time. Combining the philosophies creates something neither culture could achieve alone. They were interrupted by the sound of running footsteps. Young Jektar came racing up the path, his face bright with excitement. "Guardian Sarah! Commander, come quickly! The scouts found something amazing!" "What did they find?" Sarah asked, automatically steadying the excited youngling. "A ship, a big one, hidden in the deep ice caves. Captain Veltar says it's not Draknari design, but it's not like any human ship he's seen either. And there are energy readings that don't make sense." Zethkar and Sarah exchanged glances. "Show us," Zethkar said. They followed Jektar through the settlement to the command center, where Veltar was studying sensor displays with a team of technicians. He looked up as they entered. "Commander, we found it during routine surveys of the deep cave systems. It's approximately 2 kilometers down, embedded in glacial ice that's at least 1,000 years old." 1,000 years? Sarah moved to examine the readings. "That's impossible. No known species had advanced spaceflight technology that long ago in this region." "That's what we thought, too. But the energy signatures are definitely artificial, and they're getting stronger." "Getting stronger?" "As if the ship is waking up," Veltar said grimly. "Whatever's down there, it's been dormant for centuries. But something has started to activate it." Sarah studied the sensor data with the trained eye of someone who had analyzed unknown technologies for both research and military purposes. "These power fluctuations, they're not random. There's a pattern here, like a startup sequence." "Could it be dangerous?" Zethkar asked. "Unknown technology that's been dormant for 1,000 years and is now spontaneously activating?" Sarah looked up from the display. "I'd say the chances of it being harmless are essentially zero." "We need to investigate," Veltar said. "But the caves are treacherous at that depth. One wrong move could cause an avalanche that would bury the ship and anyone nearby." "I'll go," Sarah said immediately. "Absolutely not," Zethkar replied. "You're not a trained cave explorer." Sarah gave him a look that reminded him she was a former military operative who specialized in impossible missions. "Commander, with respect, I've infiltrated asteroid bases, underwater facilities, and gas giant research stations. Ice caves are challenging, but they're not the most dangerous environment I've worked in." "I'm going with you," Zethkar decided. "Commander, you're needed here. Sarah, you may be the expert on unknown technology and dangerous missions, but this is my colony and my responsibility. We go together or no one goes." Sarah studied his face for a moment, then nodded. "Together, then. But we do this my way. If I say retreat, we retreat immediately." "Agreed." 2 hours later, they were descending through the ice caves in specially designed suits that combined Draknari environmental technology with human mobility enhancements. Sarah had modified the designs during their preparation, adding features that Draknari engineers admitted they never would have thought of. "The beauty of human engineering," she had explained while adjusting the suit's heating system, "is that we assume everything will go wrong and design accordingly." Now, rappelling down through chambers of ancient ice, with the glow of the mysterious ship growing stronger below them, Zethkar was grateful for Sarah's paranoid thoroughness. "Energy readings are increasing," Sarah reported through the comm system. "Whatever's happening down there, our presence is accelerating it." "Can we turn back?" "Not anymore." "Look." Zethkar followed her pointing finger and saw lights beginning to pulse through the ice. The ship wasn't just activating, it was responding to them. They reached the chamber floor and found themselves standing before something that took Zethkar's breath away. The ship was massive, maybe 3 times the size of the largest Draknari vessel, but its design was unlike anything he had ever seen. Organic curves mixed with geometric patterns, materials that seemed to shift between metal and crystal, surfaces that glowed with inner light. "It's beautiful," he said softly. "It's also scanning us," Sarah replied, her voice tense. "Multiple energy beams, very sophisticated sensor arrays. This technology is far beyond anything I've seen from any known species." As they approached, sections of the ship became more transparent, revealing chambers and corridors inside, and in one of those chambers, visible through the translucent hull, was a figure. "There's someone in there," Zethkar said. "In stasis, I think. But the life support systems are activating." Sarah was reading her instruments rapidly. "Commander, this ship, I don't think it crashed here." "What do you mean?" "The ice formation around it is too uniform, too organized. This ship landed here deliberately and allowed itself to be covered by ice. It's been waiting." "Waiting for what?" Before Sarah could answer, a section of the ship's hull began to open with a sound like singing crystal. Warm air flowed out, carrying scents of unknown flowers and distant storms. A voice spoke from within the ship, using words in a language neither of them recognized, but somehow understood. "Welcome, guardians of the small ones. We have been waiting for you to prove yourselves worthy." Sarah immediately moved between Zethkar and the ship, her hand dropping to the weapon at her side. "Worthy of what?" The figure in the stasis chamber began to move, and Zethkar realized it wasn't quite humanoid. Taller than either of them, with features that suggested both grace and power, skin that seemed to shimmer with its own light. "Worthy to receive the gift we have brought. The knowledge that will protect all children of all species from those who would harm them." The being stepped out of the stasis chamber and walked toward the ship's entrance with fluid grace. As it emerged into the ice chamber, Zethkar could see it more clearly, ancient beyond measure, but with eyes that held infinite kindness. "I am Velsara of the Eternal Watch," the being said. "My people have traveled the galaxy for millions of years, seeking those who prove themselves true guardians of innocence." "And you've been watching us?" Sarah asked, though she hadn't relaxed her defensive stance. "We have been watching many species. Most fail the test. They fight for territory, for resources, for dominance. But occasionally, we find individuals who fight only to protect those who cannot protect themselves." Velsara looked directly at Sarah. "You, human warrior, chose to risk everything for children of another species. And you, Draknari leader, chose to welcome an outsider as family when she proved her worth. This is what we have been seeking." "The test," Zethkar said, understanding beginning to dawn. "The Vex raid. You arranged it?" "We did not arrange it," Velsara said gently. "But we were prepared to intervene if the children were truly in danger. We needed to see if either of you would choose to act when action meant sacrificing everything for others. And if we had failed, then the children would have been safely returned, the raiders would have been stopped, and we would have continued our search elsewhere." Velsara smiled. "But you did not fail. You both chose protection over safety, love over fear, unity over division." The being gestured toward the ship, and sections of it became transparent, revealing chambers filled with devices and knowledge banks that made Sarah gasp with recognition. Medical technology that can heal any injury, defensive systems that can protect entire planets, communication devices that allow instant understanding between any species. Velsara's voice filled with pride. "All of this we offer to those who prove themselves worthy guardians." "In exchange for what?" Sarah asked suspiciously. "In exchange for continuing to be what you already are. Guardians, protectors, those who choose love over fear." Velsara looked at both of them. "Your colony has the potential to become something remarkable. A place where multiple species can live together in peace, where children grow up learning from each other's cultures, where differences are celebrated rather than feared." A model for the rest of the galaxy, Zethkar said. Exactly. But only if you choose this path freely, without coercion or reward beyond the satisfaction of doing what is right. Sarah lowered her weapon, but remained alert. And if we refuse? Then we wish you well and depart to continue our search. The choice is yours, and there is no wrong answer. Zethkar looked at Sarah, seeing in her eyes the same thoughts he was having. This technology could make their colony safer, could protect not just their own children, but children across the galaxy. But it would also make them a target for those who wanted such power for themselves. There will be consequences, Sarah said aloud. Others will want this technology. They'll come here seeking it. Yes, Velsara agreed. Choosing to be a guardian is never easy. It means making enemies of those who profit from exploitation. It means standing against powers that seem insurmountable. It means choosing to fight battles that others would avoid. But it also means, Zethkar said slowly, that children everywhere might have a chance to grow up safe. It means, Sarah added, that what happened to those 237 children I rescued, what almost happened to your younglings, might happen less often. They stood in silence for several minutes, both understanding the weight of the decision before them. Accept the technology and become targets, but also become powerful enough to protect others. Refuse it and remain safe, but know they had chosen safety over the chance to help children across the galaxy. I have one condition, Sarah said finally. Name it. This technology doesn't belong to any one species or government. If we do this, it has to be shared freely with anyone who proves themselves worthy guardians, regardless of their politics or power. Agreed, Velsara said immediately. And I have a condition as well, Zethkar added. We maintain our autonomy. We're not joining some galactic organization or following orders from ancient powers. We make our own decisions about how to use these gifts. Also agreed. You would be free to act according to your own judgment and conscience. Sarah looked at Zethkar. Commander, what do you think? Zethkar thought about the younglings in the nursery, now safe because one human woman had chosen to risk everything for them. He thought about other children on other worlds who might face similar dangers. He thought about the kind of future he wanted for his people. I think, he said, that some gifts come with responsibilities we can't refuse. Sarah nodded. Then we accept. Velsara smiled, and the expression transformed their ancient features into something radiant. Welcome to the Eternal Watch, Guardians. Let us begin your education. As they walked toward the impossible ship, Zethkar realized that everything was about to change. His quiet colony would become something unprecedented, a place where human and Draknari worked together with technology beyond imagination to protect the innocent across the galaxy. It would be dangerous. It would be difficult. It would make them targets for every power-hungry faction in known space. It would also be the greatest adventure of their lives. Sarah, he said, as they reached the ship's entrance. No regrets? She looked back at him with a smile that reminded him of the expression she wore when watching sleeping children. Commander, I spent years fighting wars that accomplished nothing except creating more orphans. Now we have a chance to fight for something that actually matters. Then let's get started. Together, they stepped into the ship that would change the fate of the galaxy. Guided by a being older than stars and motivated by the simple desire to keep children safe. Behind them, the ice caves echoed with the sound of ancient engines coming to life, preparing to carry them toward a future none of them could imagine. 6 months after their encounter with Velsara, the colony of Kiralis had become something that existed nowhere else in the galaxy. Draknari and humans worked side by side. Their children played together in integrated nurseries, and technology that belonged to legends protected them all. Sarah stood in the new observatory, watching approach vectors on displays that would have been impossible to build with either human or Draknari technology alone. But combining human adaptability with Draknari permanence and eternal watch knowledge had created something unprecedented. Incoming transmission, announced the AI system they had developed together. Priority urgent from the Outer Rim Defense Coalition. Put it through, Sarah said, though she already had a sinking feeling about what this would be. The hologram that appeared showed Admiral Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet, looking older and more haggard than Sarah remembered. Behind him, she could see representatives of several other species, all wearing the grim expressions of people facing disaster. "Sarah Chen," Morrison said without preamble. "I know you're supposed to be dead, but we need the ghost of Sarah Chen more than we've ever needed the living woman." "Hello, Admiral," Sarah replied calmly. "What's the situation?" "The hegemony has made its move. They've taken the sanctuary worlds." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. The sanctuary worlds were 7 planets that had been designated as neutral territory for refugees, orphans, and displaced populations. Under galactic law, they were supposed to be untouchable. More than 50 million children lived there under the protection of international treaties. "How many ships?" she asked. 12 battle cruisers, 4 dreadnoughts, and a command carrier. They're calling it a police action to restore order to lawless territory. Morrison's voice was bitter. "They've seized control of all communication arrays and orbital defenses. We can't even get messages to the surface." "What about the Defense Coalition fleet?" "Scattered across 6 sectors trying to handle other crises. By the time we can gather enough ships to challenge them directly, the hegemony will have complete control of all 7 worlds." Sarah closed her eyes, running tactical calculations in her head. The hegemony was one of the galaxy's major powers, built on conquest and exploitation. They had been looking for an excuse to claim the sanctuary worlds for years, and now they had found one. "Casualties?" she asked. "Unknown, but Sarah—" Morrison's voice cracked slightly. "They're not just occupying the worlds. They're loading children onto transport ships, hundreds of thousands of them." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She thought of Nell Sarah and Jektar and all the other Draknari younglings she had helped protect. She thought of the 237 children she had rescued from weapons dealers. She thought of every child who had ever looked at her with trust and hope. "How long do we have?" 48 hours before the transports reach hegemony space. After that—" Morrison spread his hands helplessly. "You know what happens after that." Sarah knew. The hegemony would claim the children were being relocated for their own safety. Some would disappear into slave markets. Others would be indoctrinated as soldiers. Many would simply vanish, their fate unknown and untracked. "I need 12 hours to prepare," Sarah said. "Sarah, you can't take on the entire hegemony fleet, not even with whatever technology you found out there." "Admiral, I'm not the same person who disappeared 3 years ago, and I'm not working alone anymore." She cut the transmission and immediately opened a channel to Zethkar, who was in the council chambers with the other colony leaders. "We have a situation," she said simply. 30 minutes later, the colony's leadership had gathered in the war room that they had hoped never to use. The Eternal Watch technology allowed them to create detailed tactical displays of the sanctuary world situation, showing ship positions, defensive installations, and projected movement patterns. 53 million children, Zethkar said quietly, across 7 worlds. "The numbers don't matter," said Dr. Velthara, her voice fierce with anger. "One child taken against their will is one too many." "But the tactical situation is nearly impossible," Captain Veltar pointed out. 16 major hegemony warships plus support craft. Even with our advanced technology, we're talking about one small colony against a galactic superpower. "Actually," Sarah said, studying the displays, "we're talking about one small colony with technology that no one else has seen in action. allies that no one knows about, and tactical advantages that conventional thinking can't account for. She gestured to the holographic representation of the hegemony fleet. They're arranged in a standard blockade formation because they're thinking in terms of preventing other fleets from reaching the planets. They're not prepared for the kind of asymmetric warfare that a small, highly advanced force can deliver. What do you have in mind? Zethkar asked. Sarah's expression shifted into something that reminded everyone present that she had once been one of humanity's most elite military operatives. I have in mind showing the galaxy what happens when you threaten children under the protection of the Eternal Watch. She turned to address the room. This is going to be dangerous, more dangerous than anything we faced before. But if we don't act, those children will suffer fates worse than death. And if we let the hegemony get away with this, other powers will follow their example. What are you proposing? Dr. Velthara asked. I'm proposing we do what we swore to do when we accepted Velsara's gift. We protect children regardless of the cost. The room was silent for several moments. Then Zethkar stood. I'm with you. As am I, said Veltar. And I, added Dr. Velthara. One by one, every person in the room voiced their agreement. When the last voice had spoken, Sarah nodded grimly. Then let's go save some children. 18 hours later, the hegemony fleet around the sanctuary worlds detected an incoming ship on long-range sensors. It was small, fast, and using technology they didn't recognize. Admiral Koreth, commanding the occupation force, ordered his communications officer to hail the approaching vessel. Unknown ship, you are entering restricted space. Identify yourself and state your business. The response came in a clear, calm female voice. This is Guardian Sarah Chen of the Kyralis colony. You have 47 minutes to begin evacuating all civilians from the sanctuary worlds and withdraw your forces from neutral territory. Admiral Koreth laughed. Guardian? I've never heard of any such rank or authority. You're in no position to make demands. Admiral Koreth, the voice continued. I'm going to say this once, very clearly. You have taken children from their homes and loaded them onto transport ships against their will. You have violated every treaty and moral law governing the treatment of civilian populations. You will release them immediately, or I will release them myself. You're threatening the sovereign fleet of the hegemony with a single ship? No, Admiral. I'm not threatening you. I'm informing you of what's about to happen. Koreth cut the transmission and ordered his tactical officer to scan the approaching ship more thoroughly. What they found made no sense. Sir, the ship appears to be unarmed. No missile tubes, no beam weapons, no fighter bays. But it's showing energy readings that are off the scale. Shields? Unknown configuration. The energy patterns don't match any known technology. Size of crew? We're detecting maybe a dozen life signs, but they're not all human. Mixed species. Koreth studied the tactical display. 1 ship, 12 crew members, no apparent weapons. What kind of threat could they possibly pose? He was about to find out. Sarah's ship materialized out of the quantum foam directly next to the hegemony command carrier, its advanced stealth systems allowing it to appear as if from nowhere. Before the carrier's crew could react, energy beams lanced out from what had appeared to be an unarmed vessel. But these weren't weapons meant to destroy. They were precision tools designed to disable specific systems while leaving life support and crew quarters completely intact. The command carrier's weapons went offline, its engines shut down. Its communication array stopped working, and in the cargo bays where children were being held, the bulkheads simply disappeared, replaced by glowing force fields that provided better life support than the ship's original systems. What just happened? Koreth demanded. All weapon systems are down, his tactical officer reported in shock. Engines are offline. We're completely defenseless. How is that possible? Before anyone could answer, figures materialized on the bridge. Sarah Chen, wearing armor that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight, accompanied by Commander Zethkar and 5 other beings that Korath didn't recognize. "Hello, Admiral," Sarah said politely. "I'm here about the children." Korath reached for his sidearm, but found his hand wouldn't move. None of his crew could move. They were all frozen in place by some kind of stasis field. "You're probably wondering how we did that," Sarah continued conversationally. "The answer is that we represent a level of technology your species won't develop for about 10,000 years. But don't worry, we're not here to hurt anyone." She walked over to the tactical display, and with a gesture, it expanded to show the entire hegemony fleet. "We're here to collect the children you've taken, all of them, from every ship." "You can't possibly—" Korath tried to speak and found he could again. "Disable 16 warships, penetrate their defenses, and safely extract hundreds of thousands of children without causing any casualties among your crews." Sarah tilted her head. "Admiral, 3 years ago I rescued 237 children from a weapons trafficking ring that was defended by military-grade security. Today I have technology that makes my old equipment look like stone tools." As if to prove her point, the tactical display began showing ship after ship in the hegemony fleet going dark. Weapons offline, engines disabled, but all life support systems functioning perfectly. "The process is automated," Zethkar explained in accented but clear standard. "Our ship's AI is capable of disabling your entire fleet simultaneously while ensuring that not a single person is injured. But the children," Sarah continued, "are a different matter. Traumatized, scared, separated from their families. They need careful handling." She gestured, and new figures began materializing throughout the bridge. Humans, Draknari, and species that Korath didn't recognize, all wearing the same crystalline armor, all moving with purpose and authority. "We're going to personally visit every child on every ship. We're going to make sure they're safe, healthy, and comforted. We're going to explain what's happening in language they can understand, and then we're going to take them home." "You can't just steal children from hegemony ships." Sarah's expression grew cold. "Admiral, you stole them first. I'm returning them to their families." "The hegemony will never allow this." "The hegemony has no choice in the matter." Sarah's voice carried an authority that made Korath step back involuntarily. "Your ships are disabled, your weapons are offline, and your communication arrays are under our control." She gestured again, and the tactical display zoomed in on the transport ships. But more importantly, the galaxy is watching. The display shifted to show communication networks across dozens of species and hundreds of worlds. News feeds, government channels, civilian networks, all carrying the same story. The hegemony had attacked neutral territory and stolen children, and now a small group of guardians was rescuing them. "Every major power in the galaxy now knows exactly what you did here," Sarah said. "They know you violated the Sanctuary Accords. They know you took children from their families, and they know that a force they've never heard of was able to disable your entire fleet without firing a single lethal shot." "This isn't over," Korath said. "Yes, it is." The voice came from behind him, and Korath spun to see a being that was clearly not from any known species. Ancient, beautiful, radiating power that made the air itself seem to sing. "I am Velsara of the Eternal Watch," the being said. "Admiral Korath, you have violated laws that are older than your civilization. You have harmed children under our protection. This ends now." "I've never heard of any Eternal Watch." "No, you haven't. We prefer to work quietly, through chosen guardians who prove themselves worthy of our trust." Velsara gestured toward Sarah. "But when necessary, we can be more direct." The holographic display expanded again, now showing not just the local area but the entire sector. Ships were appearing throughout hegemony space, ships that registered on sensors but didn't match any known designs. "Your government will be contacted shortly by representatives of powers you didn't know existed," Velsara continued. You will be invited to discuss the terms under which the Sanctuary Accords will continue to be respected. And if we refuse? Sarah answered for Velsara. Then every child in hegemony space who suffers because of your government's policies will be rescued by guardians like us. Every slave operation, every forced labor camp, every trafficking ring will be found and shut down. You can't monitor an entire galactic government. Admiral, Sarah said with a smile that was both kind and terrifying. I spent 3 years living among the Dreknari, learning their ways and their technology. I combined that with human engineering and training from the Eternal Watch. Do you really think your security systems can keep secrets from me? To prove her point, she gestured at the tactical display one more time. It now showed detailed information about hegemony military bases, government facilities, and classified operations across dozens of worlds. We know where your black sites are, she said conversationally. We know which officials are taking bribes from slavers. We know about the weapons testing on civilian populations and the resource extraction operations that violate environmental protection laws. Korath felt his blood turn to ice. If this information reached the Galactic Council? But, Sarah continued, we're not interested in destroying your government. We're interested in protecting children. So here's what's going to happen. She walked over to him. And despite her small size compared to his massive frame, Korath found himself intimidated by her presence. You're going to return to hegemony space and report that you encountered a force beyond your ability to resist. You're going to recommend that your government negotiate in good faith with the powers that are about to contact them. You're going to suggest that respecting the rights of children and civilians might be better policy than trying to exploit them. And if my government doesn't listen, then they'll discover what happens when you threaten the innocent and the Eternal Watch decides to take a more direct interest in your affairs. Several hours later, the children had all been safely evacuated from the hegemony ships. They were aboard vessels that looked like nothing Korath had ever seen. Ships that somehow managed to be both large enough to hold thousands of passengers and small enough to move with impossible speed and grace. Sarah stood on his bridge one last time, but now she was alone except for Zethkar. Admiral, she said, I want you to understand something. What happened here today wasn't about politics or territory or power. It was about children who were taken from their families. I understand that. I hope you do. Because the next time someone in your government decides to target civilian populations, I won't be as gentle. This was gentle. Sarah's smile was genuinely kind now. Admiral, I disabled your entire fleet, rescued hundreds of thousands of children, and exposed your government's illegal activities to the entire galaxy. And I did it without killing a single person or causing any permanent damage to your ships. She gestured around the bridge where his crew was still working at their stations, unharmed and largely unaffected by what had happened. Yes, this was gentle, but only because the children were rescued before any real harm came to them. Her expression grew serious. Don't test what happens when we're not able to be gentle. With that, she and Zethkar shimmered and vanished, leaving Korath alone with his thoughts and his disabled fleet. 6 hours later, Hegemony High Command received a diplomatic contact from representatives of 17 species they had never heard of, all offering to discuss the terms under which the Sanctuary Accords would continue to be respected. The negotiations lasted 3 weeks. When they were concluded, the hegemony had agreed to withdraw from all neutral territories, cease all operations targeting civilian populations, and submit to regular inspections by independent observers. They had also agreed to pay reparations to the families of the children they had taken and to fund new refugee protection programs across the galaxy. Back on Corellis, Sarah stood in the nursery complex watching Draknari and human children play together while their parents worked side by side on projects that were changing the galaxy. Nelsara ran up to her, now healthy and strong and full of life. "Guardian Sarah, tell us about the rescue." "Which rescue?" Sarah asked, lifting the young girl into her arms. "The big one, where you saved all the children from the bad ships." Sarah looked around at the mixed group of younglings gathered around her, their faces bright with curiosity and trust. Some were Draknari, some were human, and a few were from species that had sought shelter in their unusual colony. "Well," she said, settling down on the floor so they could all gather around her, "it starts with the most important rule of being a guardian." "What's that?" asked Jektar. "Never, ever give up when children are in danger, no matter how scared you are, no matter how impossible it seems, no matter what it costs you personally. Children are the future of every species, and they deserve to be protected." "But how did you beat all those big ships?" asked a human girl named Emma. Sarah smiled. "The same way I beat the raiders who came here, with help from friends, with tools that were made by people who cared about protecting others, and with the knowledge that some things are worth fighting for no matter what." "Will you teach us to be guardians too?" Nell Sarah asked. "Sweetie, you already are guardians. Every time you help a friend who's hurt, every time you stand up to someone who's being mean, every time you choose to be kind instead of cruel, you're being a guardian." The children seemed satisfied with this answer, and they settled in to hear the full story of the rescue. As Sarah began to tell it, she saw Zethkar approaching with Velsara, who had become a regular visitor to their colony. "The children love your stories," the ancient being observed. "They love the idea that someone is watching out for them," Sarah replied, "that if something bad happens, someone will come to help. And now that's true, across the galaxy, because of what you've built here." Sarah looked around at the colony that had become something unprecedented. Different species working together, children growing up as friends instead of strangers, technology being used to protect instead of exploit. "We've built it together," she corrected. "Human determination, Draknari loyalty, and eternal watch wisdom. None of us could have done this alone." "And what comes next?" Zethkar asked. Sarah watched the children playing, their laughter echoing through the chambers that had once been threatened by raiders. She thought about the hundreds of thousands of children they had rescued, now safely home with their families. She thought about the changes rippling through the galaxy as more species learned that there were guardians watching, ready to protect the innocent. "Next," she said, "we keep doing what we've been doing. We protect children. We welcome those who need shelter. We share what we've learned with others who prove themselves worthy guardians." She stood up, still holding Nell Sarah, and looked out through the transparent walls at the stars beyond. "And when someone threatens children anywhere in the galaxy, they'll discover that the Guardians of Kiralis have very long memories and very powerful friends." Velsara smiled. "The universe is a safer place for children because of what you've chosen to become." "No," Sarah said softly. "The universe is safer because we chose to act when action was needed. The rest is just details." As the stars wheeled overhead and the children played in safety below, the colony of Kiralis continued its work of proving that different species could live together in peace. And that sometimes the best way to honor the future was to protect those who would inherit it. In the months and years that followed, the name Guardian Sarah would become known across the galaxy, not as a warrior or a conqueror, but as someone who had chosen to use incredible power for the simple purpose of keeping children safe. And in nurseries on 1,000 worlds, parents would tell their younglings stories about the human woman and the Draknari commander who had proven that love for children could transcend species, culture, and the vast distances between stars. The universe was indeed a safer place, and it would remain so as long as there were those willing to stand guard over the innocent and defend the right of all children to grow up free.